Our last speaker is going to be Anusara Herath, also with MPI, and the title of her talk is a risk-based approach for regulation of high-risk Phytophthora species in the New Zealand border.
Yes, Andy. Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Anusara Herath from the Plant Germplasm Imports team. And if I said you something brief about the job, we set requirements for plant material being imported into New Zealand for planting. So, first of all, I would like to, how can I go far? Is this a button? The green button. Oh, God, thank you. First of all, I would like to present what stuff that I'm going to consider throughout my talk. So, what is Phytophthora, and how Phytophthora could enter New Zealand, and what measures are already in place to manage Phytophthora species, and finally, the assessment in progress by the MPI for emerging Phytophthora species. Let's see what is Phytophthora. They are actually not true fungi, they are water moths. And these are closely related to brown algae. And also these Phytophthora species, they are highly adapted plant pathogens that can produce diverse spore forms, can be dispersed by various means. So sporangia, these can be blown by wind and rain splash, whereas the waterborne structures, the zoospores produced by sporangia, can be dispersed by water. And this is the major infective propagule of Phytophthora species. And oospores and chlamydospores, they are the long-term survival structures, and they can be disseminated by soil. There are over 150 Phytophthora species researched by SCIEN has shown, and according to their current modeling exercise, they have predicted that there may be in between 287 to 611 Phytophthora species which have not yet been identified globally. And these species can efficiently be hybridized to form new species, and we don't know, maybe the new species may be more virulent than the parental species. And historically, Phytophthora are known to be root pathogens, but there are some aerial pathogens emerging. A good example is Phytophthora romarum, which causes sudden oak death. In general, Phytophthora can cause death and decline, and the most familiar example that we are experiencing in New Zealand is kauri dieback, caused by this Phytophthora species in the northland region, and as the result, that kauri forests are dying. How Phytophthora could enter New Zealand? A likely way of Phytophthora could enter New Zealand is via imported host plants. And a good example for this is Phytophthora lateralis in the UK. It is known to be introduced through the infected nursery stock plant imported from Europe. And it is also possible that Phytophthora species can enter through when passengers arrive in New Zealand, and the shoes and other equipment are free from soil to prevent entry of these species. What measures are already in place to manage Phytophthora on imported nursery stock? According to the import health standard, for all nursery stock material to be imported into New Zealand must meet requirements in the import health standard for nursery stock. That includes inspection of plant material prior to export by the exporting government authority, which certifies that the plants have no visually detectable symptoms for pests and diseases. In addition, on arrival into New Zealand, the plants also will be inspected again by MPI to verify that they are free of the visually detectable symptoms of pests and diseases. And there are most of nursery stock material, they have to be grown and inspected during post-entry quarantine prior to biosecurity clearance is given to New Zealand to arrive. In addition, there are some specific requirements for Phytophthora romarum. Example is ornamental plant hosts can only be imported from MPI-approved countries. Today, there are 4 countries approved by MPI recognized free of Phytophthora romarum. And also the government authority of the exporting country certifies that each consignment has been sourced from a pest-free area for this Phytophthora romarum. For horticultural plant house as well, there are some stringent measures in place, and currently MPI is in the process to update the import health standard to include specific testing for Phytophthora romarum for horticultural hosts. In addition to these Phytophthora species, MPIs, there are lots of emerging Phytophthora coming into role. So we have, MPI has the emerging risk system already in place, and it monitors lots of published literature. For example, when pests associated with new hosts, and when pests are found in new countries, and also emerging new pests. In addition, there are other groups in New Zealand. They are really keen and work together with MPI to establish a well-established knowledge-based system, because the impact and the entry and impact of Phytophthora species to study, because it poses a great risk to New Zealand plant-based industries. The impact is much severe. So, according to the current assessment for Phytophthora species in MPI, the way that how does MPI assess risk, as Christine has already said before, we assess the likelihood of introduction with consideration of entry, established exposure, and establishment to determine the risk. And once our assessment in this likelihood of introduction assessment, we consider mainly the biology and transmission of the pathogen, and what suitability of hosts in New Zealand, and the climate suitability, things like that. And once our assessment determines that the Phytophthora species can enter and establish in New Zealand, then we assess the impact on New Zealand economy and environment, social and human health. So with our current assessment, we have identified 20 Phytophthora species that may potentially risk to New Zealand, and to focus in our assessment. So among them, we have identified 6 Phytophthora species potentially to pose high impact. So among those 6 species, 3 of them are unlikely to enter into New Zealand, because Phytophthora pinifolia, the only known host is Pinus species, and Pinus species cannot be imported according to the current import health standard to New Zealand. When we consider another species, Phytophthora nemorosa, it is known to be associated with Phytophthora romarum and has the same host range. However, only occurs in the USA. So under the requirements for Phytophthora romarum, we do not import nursery stock material from the USA. Phytophthora ostracidri, it has a limited host range, and of the 4 known hosts, only 3 can be imported as nursery stock. In addition to these 3 Phytophthora species, Phytophthora parmivora, capsicii, and infestans are also known to be high impacting, because they have a very broad host range. And this includes many horticultural and ornamental hosts, and many of the hosts cannot be imported as nursery stock. But if arrived, it may potentially cause a major impact on our plant-based industries. In addition to those 6 high-impact Phytophthora, MPI also assessed another 14 species. So we are going to assess these species as well to include our assessment. What options available for management of Phytophthora? So as I have already mentioned in one of the previous slides, measures are already in place for nursery stock prior to export, on arrival in New Zealand, and during post-entry quarantine. But in addition to that, MPI will also look at what other measures we could include in the import health standard to manage the risk of Phytophthora species. So as part of our assessment, we have identified these plants infected by Phytophthora may not show symptoms. So as some of the examples for options that we are going to consider are to introduce mandatory testing, such as isolation-based methods or PCR, and limit the nursery stock imports to approved exporting countries or facilities, pest-free area or pest-free place of production. In addition to limit to certain commodity types, for example, to limit to unrooted cuttings for Phytophthora which can colonize root material, and also introduce climate control, that is high humidity and temperature control to increase the likelihood of expression of disease to see the symptoms, and extending the quarantine period to give sufficient time to allow disease expression. In addition, higher level of post-entry quarantine to contain the spores of these Phytophthora species. Currently, there are suitable post-entry quarantine facilities available in New Zealand to contain water or wind-borne spores of these Phytophthora species. So it has high level of management strategies within the quarantine facility. So there is a operational research in progress in collaboration with the Science and Plant and Food Research to assess whether tissue culture is a pathway to transmit some of the plant pathogens. This study includes Phytophthora species as well. So as one of the diagnostics method, in addition to PCR, Science will be studying next generation sequencing to detect these pathogens, and Phytophthora also will be included. So a number of Phytophthora species are coming into role. So next generation sequencing would be a very useful technique in future to detect and identify the Phytophthora species which we already aware of right now, and many new Phytophthora species can emerge in future. In addition, MPI is linked with Phytophthora hyphal network for latest research findings on these species which can be useful in risk management. In summary, MPI is currently assessing high-risk Phytophthora and options for management on imported nursery stock, and we are intended to consult the risk management proposal in future once it is finalized, once it is drafted. So if you guys are happy to be included in our stakeholder list, please contact us. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who supported for this project, and thanks for listening. Thank you.